My name is Maresin, and I am 29 years old. Just 7 days after giving birth, I still moved slowly. Every movement brought back the memory of an exhausting labor, built-up fatigue, and entire nights without rest. My son was only a week old, and I was still trying to adjust to my new role as a mother. But what truly hurt me wasn't my body's recovery. It was the transformation my husband, Ison, had gone through. Before I became pregnant, everyone believed we had the perfect marriage. Ison was a successful, polished man who always knew exactly how to carry himself in public. His family held considerable wealth and lived on a massive property on the outskirts of the city, where they hosted lavish dinners and constantly talked about business and investments. I came from a very different background. My father had built a transportation company from nothing. He was never the wealthiest man in town, but he was the most respected by those who truly knew him. He taught me that money should be used to help people, never to belittle them. For a long time, I believed Ison thought the same way. I was deeply mistaken. Everything began after our son was born. The first days back home were exhausting. I could barely sleep more than 2 hours at a stretch. The baby cried non-stop at night, and I did everything humanly possible to care for him. Ison, however, seemed more concerned with keeping his usual routine than with lending a hand. He left early every morning and came home late every night, always with an excuse ready. Meetings, obligations, being busy. Exactly 1 week after the delivery, his mother organized a huge family dinner that the entire extended family would attend. Brothers, uncles, cousins, even relatives coming in from other states. I didn't feel like going. I was exhausted, but Ison insisted, saying everyone wanted to meet the baby. I agreed, thinking that at least I'd have my husband's support. Once again, I was wrong. That afternoon, I got ready slowly. Dressing a newborn was already a challenge, and doing it while still in physical pain made it even harder. When I finally finished, I came downstairs carrying my son, and that's when I saw something that left me stunned. Ison had his car keys in his hand. I asked if we were leaving, and he said yes. Everything was set. He looked at me for a few seconds, and then said something I will never be able to erase from my memory: that I would be taking the bus. I thought he was joking. I waited for him to smile, but he didn't. I asked what he meant, and he explained that he would drive the car to the dinner and that I, as he'd already told me, would take the bus. I looked at my son, and then looked at him. I reminded him I had given birth only a week ago, but he told me to stop exaggerating. I asked if he actually expected me to ride public transportation with a newborn, and he said it wasn't that far. I felt the air leave my lungs. I asked if he was serious, and he just told me to stop making a scene out of everything. That's where the conversation ended. He simply walked out the door, and I heard the engine of his luxury car fading into the distance, leaving me alone, with my baby in my arms. I stood still for several minutes, trying to process what had just happened. Eventually, I wrapped the baby in a blanket and headed out to the bus stop. It was cold. The baby was asleep, and I fought to keep myself from breaking down in tears. The stop was crowded. Some people looked at me with pity. Others simply stared at the newborn. When the bus arrived, I climbed on with great difficulty. No one there knew that my husband had driven off alone in a vehicle worth more than many houses. No one knew I was his wife, and no one imagined how much I was breaking apart inside. The ride felt endless. Every pothole made me clench my jaw. Every passing minute deepened my shame. When I finally arrived at the family mansion, I saw the car parked right at the entrance, gleaming under the lights, immaculate, as if nothing had happened. I walked in carrying my son, and the dinner was already underway. Conversations paused for a moment, and every eye turned to me. That's when Eason's mother smiled and said I had finally arrived, asking where her son was. That question almost made me laugh inside, because she knew exactly where he was. She had seen him walk in 40 minutes earlier. I told her he had arrived a while ago, and she feigned surprise. Some people exchanged uncomfortable glances, but no one said a word. I took a seat and tried to focus on my son, though the humiliation was only just beginning. Throughout the dinner, I listened to comments about money, property, and status. At one point, one of the uncles raised his glass and remarked that Eason had always known how to choose well. Everyone smiled. I asked what he meant, and the man let out a small laugh, saying he meant Eason had found himself a simple wife. Several people laughed, and I felt my face burning with shame. Eason was smiling too. In that moment, I understood that none of this had been an impulse, a misunderstanding, or a joke. He had wanted to humiliate me in front of everyone, and he had succeeded. I looked at my sleeping son, looked at that table full of people who considered what had happened perfectly normal, and for the first time I felt something stronger than sadness. A cold, silent, dangerous rage, because while everyone kept laughing and talking, I was beginning to understand that this day had changed something inside me forever. That night, I said absolutely nothing. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't make a scene. I simply watched. I watched Eason smiling as he talked about investments, watched his mother bragging about the family, watched everyone acting as though it were completely normal for a woman who had given birth only a week earlier to ride a bus with a newborn. And as I watched them, I made a decision. I would never again allow myself to be treated that way. When the dinner ended, Eason drove us home, and the whole way back he didn't say a single word about what had happened. No apology, no explanation, nothing. As if I had imagined it all. As if my humiliation had never existed. 2 days later, something unexpected happened. My father came to visit, and the moment he opened the door, he sensed something was wrong. He always had that ability to read me, even when I tried to hide my emotions. He took his grandson in his arms, looked at him for a moment, then looked straight at me and asked what had happened. I tried to smile and say it was nothing, but my voice broke. So I told him everything. The bus, the dinner, the mockery, the laughter, Eison's silence, and how alone I had felt. As I spoke, his face grew more and more serious. When I finished, the room fell completely silent. Finally, he asked if Eason had really made me take a bus only a week after giving birth. I confirmed it, in front of his entire family. Then something happened that I will never forget. My father took a deep breath and said only, "I understand now." That was all. No shouting, no threats, no lectures, just those few words. But I knew my father, and I knew exactly what they meant. In the days that followed, nothing visible happened. Life went on. Ison kept working. His family kept hosting gatherings. Everything seemed normal until one morning. His phone rang. I remember his expression clearly. First confusion, then worry, then fear. I asked what was wrong, and he didn't answer. He spent the whole morning making calls, and by the afternoon he was still on edge. The next day he was desperate, and by the third day he seemed like an entirely different man. I eventually learned why. His family's main company had lost several of its most important clients, million-dollar contracts and strategic partnerships, vanishing one after another. Ison spent hours trying to understand what was happening, with no one giving him clear answers, until a week later he received a phone call that changed everything. I was in the kitchen feeding the baby when I heard him shout from his office, something I had never heard before. He walked into the dining room, his face completely pale, and asked if it had been my father's doing. I asked what he meant, and he told me not to play games with him. I stayed silent. He said the clients were canceling their contracts, and that all of them were connected to my father. That's when I understood. My father hadn't destroyed anything. He had simply stopped helping. For years he had recommended companies, introduced partners, opened doors. And now those doors were closing, not out of revenge, but because he had decided Ison no longer deserved his trust. Ison asked if I knew what one of those clients had told him. I didn't answer. He said he'd been told that if a man was capable of abandoning the mother of his child just a week after she gave birth, he probably wasn't someone trustworthy in business either. The room went completely silent. For the first time, I saw something in my husband I had never seen before. Real, deep shame. In the days that followed, he tried to make things right. He brought me flowers, gifts, jewelry, even arranged an elegant dinner. But it was already too late, because the problem had never really been the bus itself. It was what that bus represented: disrespect, cruelty, and contempt. Things no gift could buy. One night he sat across from me, looking exhausted and defeated, and admitted he had made a mistake. I listened in silence. He said he wanted to fix it, that he knew, but I told him he couldn't. I looked at our son sleeping in his crib, then looked back at him. I told him that when I was standing at that bus stop holding our baby, I needed a husband, and he had chosen to become something else. He didn't answer, because he knew it was true. Months later, I filed for divorce. His family tried to make me change my mind, promising things would be different. But I no longer trusted them, or Ison, or anyone who had stayed silent that night. Today, my son is 3 years old. He's happy, healthy, and growing up surrounded by people who truly love him. Sometimes I think back to that phone call I made while holding my newborn, the one where I asked my father to please ruin his life. And in time, I understood something. My father never ruined Ison's life. Ison ruined it himself the day he decided that the luxury of his car mattered more than his wife's dignity and his newborn son's well-being.